Thank you. Well, we're fortunate to have with us two experts who are challenging the norms and defining new standards about how to emotionally support children who are fighting cancer and surviving cancer. Laurie, when it comes to standards for the psychosocial care of children with cancer and their families, you quite literally wrote that book. What is an important standard you'd like to see universalized across all pediatric care centers?
Well, thank you for that question. First, I want to be able to say that it wasn't just me. We had so many professionals, close to 100, across the country that helped develop those standards. And they were really inspired by Victoria Sardi Brown and Peter Brown, who lost their only child to a rare form of osteosarcoma. And from their experience, they realized that for them, what would have been the most helpful outcome after the death of their child is to be able to have better psychosocial support. So to answer that question of 15 standards, the diagnosis of a child with cancer is a life-altering event. And to be able to assess the family's strengths, their limitations, the child's mental health needs, the family mental health needs, their social considerations is critical. And so being able to have systematic assessments throughout the treatment trajectory, through survivorship, or end-of-life and bereavement would be the most important standard. But really all of them together would make evidence-based care and the outcome for children with families so much stronger.
Now, are you concerned that if these measures aren't standardized, people won't take them into account, won't take them seriously?
I believe that people recognize the psychosocial needs of families. When a child undergoes cancer therapy afterwards, and they talk about their experience, they don't necessarily talk about the level of vincristine they received. Mm-hmm. They will talk about events that were traumatic. They will talk about conversations that were very difficult. They will talk about people who really stood by their side and people who did not. So I believe that everyone recognizes the need for psychosocial care. Do all centers have the resources to be able to use a wonderful multidisciplinary team that includes really strong nurses, child life specialists, social workers on the front line, along with psychologists, and access to psychiatry for both the child, the siblings, and the parents? Mm-hmm. That doesn't always happen. Ideally, an integrated team makes for better care for everyone involved, and also for the outcomes for their family.
Exactly. Now, Rachel, you're a child life specialist at Children's National Hospital. Can you tell us what that involves and about your work for Hope for Henry?
Being a child life specialist, we really want to make the hospitalization easier for kids. We want to make sure that they understand everything that's going on when they're in the hospital, that we take the big words that the doctors use and bring it down to kid-friendly language so that they're prepared for what's going to happen. And with my work with Hope for Henry Foundation, we just want to empower the kids to have more active roles in their care and to reduce the stress that they're experiencing through the programs that we offer. So with Child Life and Hope for Henry together, we make a really dynamic team to help make the hospitalization that much better for kids so that kids can be kids in the hospital no matter what their diagnosis is.
I read on the website that you're trying to fight the fear, loneliness, monotony that happens in the hospital, and also let children experience wonder every day, even if they're in the hospital.
Yeah, absolutely. We bring about programs, whether it's events or we decorate their rooms to make them less sterile and less boring, if you will. And with our Super Duper incentive plan, our Super Path to Super Duper Better, we encourage them to take active roles in their care by having them tell us what challenges they're facing in the hospital. And then we let them earn Hope for Henry bucks to earn real prizes. So it's kind of like they're doing a lot of work in the hospital, and we get paid to go to work every day. And so the challenging things that they have to face that are really hard to do day in and day out, like taking medicine, working with physical therapy, having dressing changes and port access, we really are doing a good thing about helping them to get through those daily things through their treatment.
I believe you brought a video.
Yeah.
Maybe now would be a good time to see the video.
For people who haven't gone through a cancer diagnosis, a cancer treatment, describe what hospital life is like with and without Hope for Henry.
I was diagnosed with juvenile dermatomyositis 11 years ago when I was 10 years old. A hospital room is this small space where the walls are very blah, with just scuffed tile floors that smell very strongly of antiseptic and scratchy blankets, and it wasn't anything like what I would want my room or a safe space for me to be like. So partnering with Dormify, Hope for Henry is bringing patients who are in the hospital for long periods of time a way to decorate their room and make it their own with pillows and string lights and make it a happy place, a place that you want to be in.
Both said having cancer is a traumatic experience for a child. So a lot of what you do is to benefit the child in the moment, but also to prevent long-term emotional distress, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. They spend years in treatment and over 1,000 days if we put it into perspective. And we want to make sure that each of those days and years, months that they're there, that we counteract the effects that they'll see on a psychosocial level. So when they are in their rooms and having procedures done, we want to make sure that years after that, they aren't focused on necessarily the bad parts that happen in the hospital, but the good things that happen that help them just be children in the hospital. Because at the end of the day, when you think about it long term, they will have medical complications, but what is going to happen on a psychosocial level for them is really impacted as well.
How much time and attention should be given to preparing them for the effects of treatment in their adulthoods, things that will linger, maybe fertility issues, debt, anxiety, depression?
So those are some of the standards of care as well. Anticipatory guidance is critically important at the time of diagnosis to what to expect when you're in a hospital, who's going to be coming into the room, the team members who you're going to be meeting, what you may experience in terms of who could be able to stay with you, your friends being able to visit, what the medications would be like. Anticipatory guidance is critically important. And through the course of illness, communication with the child and the family at an appropriate developmental level of the child, respecting the learning style. Some people do really well just hearing information. Other people really need to see it. They're much more visual learners. Families may need to have time to be able to process things. So being able to respect where they are at that time in the learning style is critically important. And the same for survivorship. The same for preparing them for what could take place after treatment ends, which is a very exciting time, but it's also an anxiety-filled time. What to expect, you had all these people with you right there to be able to contact, and now you're expected to reemerge into your world and your family.
Where's that support system?
And where is that support system is really important. Have you been able to maintain it? That's an important thing that we try to be able to help the child to do throughout treatment, and also for the family to be able to re-engage. And sometimes even if the parent is partnered, everyone took different roles, and they then look at each other, and that's a really critical time for a marriage, to be able to say, we put everything under the rug just to get through this. Let's find ourselves together again.
Children are sometimes placed in treatment facilities far away from home. Parents aren't able to be there. Even if a child is closer, the parent might not always be able to be there. What additional support do you recommend in that kind of situation?
We really work closely with our child life team, social work, nursing, but also volunteers are really important in the hospital, because they will be able to sit with children and play with them when parents aren't around, and do, play games, help with homework, very normalizing things for kids. So we all work really closely together to provide those opportunities for them. But as a medical team, sometimes you can't sit maybe for 35 minutes to play a game of Uno. And sometimes you can, which is great. But our volunteers are really helpful with that as well. And that's where we kind of bring in our events and different things to make that day to break up their hospital day so that they can have some fun things like a visit from a superhero or a princess party, something that just makes it a different day in the hospital and not the same thing going day by day.
Technology has also helped so that children and families could be able to FaceTime with their family. They could be able to see what's in the room. I strongly recommend that parents have standardized times that they talk to the siblings at home. But they're so affected. You know, the sibling, their pain is really invisible, but they suffer when their family is separated, so that they know, oh, mommy is going to call me at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to hear from her at 4 and wait for that call before bedtime. For kids play computer games and they're connected to their friends. School reentry, we try to work really closely with the school so that the child could feel connected. And there are a lot of programs so they could feel like they're still part of that classroom and the kids could see what they look like now. It's not a surprise when they come back.
We'll be taking questions from the audience in a few minutes. I'm imagining the strategies for a toddler with cancer are very different from those for a teenager with cancer. How do you take those developmental issues into account?
We work really closely with the parents. When they come in and are first diagnosed, we have not met them. So we'll ask questions of the parents of what is their baseline, how do they normally, learn different information, how do they react to stress, and take that and what we know about typical, child development and take that into the hospital situation, knowing what stressors they will face with medication and procedures, and we'll take the information and give it to them at an appropriate level based on their age. So what we say, like you said, to a preschool child will be very different from a teenager, but also including them in what questions they have and what things they want to get out of this experience or what they want to know, whether they want to know step by step or all up front, after, post-process. So just different ways in involving them to have some sort of choices, since all their choices have been taken away at this point.
You may have touched on this a little with the calls and the technology, but how do we engage siblings to be a part of the healing process?
Thank you again for that question, because they are a population that is often not recognized, and their needs are tremendous, and they will remember this experience for the rest of their lives as well. Engaging them early on, assessment of what the siblings' needs are. If they can't come to the hospital, to be able to see if we could be able to talk to people in the home community, establishing routines for them, but hopefully to be able to bring them to the hospital at least 1 or 2 times, and not to introduce them as, Jack's brother, but introduce them for who they are, to be able to have them learn in their own developmental way what's taking place. We have a wonderful day. One of my favorite days at NIH is the sibling day, and where they are super SIBs, and we take them through the operating room. We have them go through a mock scanner. We have them go through a lab, and then we have all kinds of therapeutic activities during the day. But at the end of the day, they come into a room, and there's a standing ovation for them. And they stand on a stage and they get a medal for being a super SIB, and they talk about what they learned for the day. Their picture is taken, and they're so proud because the day is about them. One day that's really about them, and recognizing how their needs are very real. And they play such an important role in the family to help keep the family together.
Excellent point. How do you navigate topics like food insecurity or other out-of-hospital disparities that you may discover in your conversations with families?
Another standard of care is to be able to assess for financial needs and financial, what word is often used, toxicities, because it's not only the medical costs or out-of-pocket costs, it's everything else. It's transportation, it's parking, it's food eating in hospitals, it's being out of work and paying for insurance, and who's going to cover those bills. It is essential that we assess for that, not just at the time of diagnosis and what a family needs, but really throughout treatment, and even after treatment is over, to be able to see what their needs are. There's some wonderful organizations that could help, but we have to ask. Many families feel bad telling people about those other stresses because that's not considered to be important, or they're embarrassed. So it's really up to us to be able to assess that on an ongoing basis. And if you could imagine, after a child, for those children who die, for families to see the bills coming in and having to be able to pay those bills when they're just so empty and grieving, very painful.
Very painful. Well, we're going to turn to the audience and see if there's a question. I see one in the middle.
Hi there, good morning. Thank you for sharing your information. Is what you're currently doing really the standard of care that we're seeing throughout the nation? Are there specific guidelines to assure that these are the kind of practices and the right treatment that families and children should be having? And what are the hurdles to accomplish that? Thank you.
So thank you for that question. Ideally, we would like to see all 15 standards implemented in all settings, but that's very different for every institution, especially when they have limited resources. So because implementation is so hard, the past year we've been working on creating something called a matrix and guidelines. So the matrix is like a scoring for each standard. So you could be able to see as your own center, where are we? From a 1 of really not providing these services at all to a 5, which could be gold standard. And each center may say, this year we're going to just work on addressing the needs of siblings or preparing survivors. And so they could then open up the guidelines and see how to. How can we move up that score? What do we need to do? What resources do we need to be able to have? So we're very hopeful once those come out in the next year, centers can be able to do a better job to make it more, implementable and doable in different sites. And it may just be picking 1 or 2 a year to be able to do.
Yeah.
But thank you again for that question.
Is there another question? Yes.
Hi, Sandra Charles, physician, Library of Congress. I wanted to follow up on that gentleman's question because I am aware I have a child doing a pediatric residency, and what you're talking about now are some of the issues she's identifying. And one group that I've not heard mentioned are single mothers with other children, some of whom need to be in school, but they have to travel with a whole pack to the hospital, which may be several miles away, to take care of that child with cancer. And it would be wonderful if these standards could be shared in residency programs and with managed care organizations who have a far reach, because those are some of the areas where many of what you mentioned are lacking.
These are wonderful questions and comments, and thank you. And that is an essential component of the psychosocial assessment, to look at family constellation. Not only do we have additional challenges for lone parents who's trying to manage a child in the hospital, a job, bills, and children at home, there are also something that we know are lone parents, and those are parents who are partnered but feel very alone in caring for their child with cancer and those stresses. We also have many parents who may be separated or divorced, and we need to be able to make sure everybody is engaged. There could be co-parenting taking place, so really assessing each individual child, the family constellation, what really works for their child, and bringing everybody in and supporting each of those family members in the best way possible so they feel that they could be the best parent they could be. Because the parents who do the best at the end are those who feel like they really did a good job caring for their child and supporting their child. So thank you for that comment.
Rachel, how would you like to see Hope for Henry evolve? And is there some aspect of hospital living for children that we haven't addressed yet that we should?
I think as we continue, going along the journey, and everybody just remembering, that kids are kids, we will get to the point where we have more hospitals that are kid-friendly from the time they walk into the front door of the hospital to the hospital rooms. I think it's more of a worldwide issue of making sure that the hospitals are kid-friendly, and with foundations like Hope for Henry, who help to bring that to the hospital, is great. And we're growing really fast. We started in one hospital, and now we're in 10 hospitals with the programs that we offer, and then we're going to continue to grow in that. But it's a really just trying to get the hospitals on board with making these changes to help the kids and their families feel more comfortable when they're there, and the siblings when they come in, because some hospitals just are very business, and it just is not what kids want to see when they come. They don't want to come there, and they are afraid. So if we brighten it up and make it a little bit better, make families more comfortable when the kids aren't stressed, the parents are, their stress level is down, so it helps overall.
Well, that's a really good ending note. Thank you very much for being here and sharing this really great information.